Good morning, everyone. Everyone who's here in the audience in person, welcome. And to those of you who have joined us by Zoom, we're really happy to have you here. This is our first hybrid event, so please excuse any stumbling on my part in advance. We are really thrilled to have with us today Westchester County Budget Director Larry Soule, who's been awesome to work with in preparing for today. So thank you. Here we go. We also want to thank our county executive, George Latimer, our deputy county executive, who you'll hear from in a couple of minutes, and Emily Saltzman and Joan McDonald for the work that it took to make this happen and for their accessibility to us. The ongoing partnership during these really difficult times has been really, really appreciated. And now I see Emily is with us as well. So welcome. Oh, there we go. So nonprofit Westchester, we are as strong as our members, and I would love to thank all of our members organizations for the incredible work they've been doing throughout the pandemic and every day. You are what makes NPW strong and great and fierce. So thank you. We have a sponsorship for our government relations series, Arnie Linhart from Strategic Services, who is also with us here today. Thank you, Arnie, for sponsoring this. Thank you to our growing list of business sponsors who recognize the importance of the work of the nonprofit sector and investing in us. We have two other events, as I said, October 7th, October 21st. I'm happy to say that at these events, we are able to provide coffee and light breakfast, if that's intriguing to anyone to actually attend in person. As I said, we are as strong as our members. If you are not a member, you should be. So please join us. I want a special shout out to the Westchester Library System for always being an incredible partner to us, to Terry Kirshner, the executive director, the rest of the team, Rob and Kate for from A to Z, just making this possible for us. To Suzanne Gardos, our director of operations, and to Mike Grahab, who is doing the technology for us. Thank you. We are really fortunate, as I said, to have the Westchester County Budget Director with us. He has been with the county for over a decade, so lots of experience, lots of different ebbs and flows and experience through good and bad times. So thank you for being here. I'm going to put our Deputy County Executive on the spot to please just bring greetings because you're here and we thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It is certainly a privilege to be here. So on behalf of County Executive George Latimer, I'm Deputy Director of Operations Emily Saltzman, the Budget Director, Deputy Budget Director. You have all of the folks here on behalf of the County Executive George Latimer. This kind of forums are critically important as we go through these budget cycles and with all the challenges that all of the nonprofit organizations have gone through this last 18, 19 months through the COVID crisis. We are critically important to have this kind of conversations, first with the budget director, then with our partners on the County Board of Legislators, and then finally with County Executive George Latimer himself. So again, it's a privilege to be here this morning and to hear that in person or on Zoom, whichever ways that you're doing it, but to be able to participate in these forums. Nonprofit Westchester and the leadership of Jan Fisher and all of the team at Nonprofit Westchester ensuring that the message is getting out to all of our nonprofit partners. And you all's work has been critical in getting us to the place that we are today. So thank you so much, Jan, for the opportunity to bring greetings this morning. And we look forward to hearing from the budget director, understanding the process that continually changes, not at our county level, but with all of our other partners. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good morning, and thanks for inviting me. I don't really get out much, so this is a great opportunity, especially during COVID. But so this is a great opportunity to, and so I'll just jump right in here and start to discuss what the county does. I think this audience here today has a pretty good understanding of what the county does, but a lot of people, I think, in the county, average citizen, may not really understand all that the county does, especially if they're not receiving some of the services that we important services that we provide that all of you help the county with, and we couldn't do it without you. You play an integral role in all the services that the county provides. So one of the largest departments, social services, I'll just go through the list: criminal justice, public health, special needs education, the community college, Beeline bus system, all of the parks, golf, and other recreational facilities, emergency communications, wastewater treatment, potable water supply, recycling. Naming some of the larger, please, I'm sorry. Yes, I should be doing that. There we go. And so the county does a lot. I mean, a lot of what we do is mandated by the state, but we go above and beyond what is mandated by the state. And that's one of the things that makes Westchester so great, is that we have this network of not-for-profits that help us provide these services, and not just mandated, but in some cases discretionary, but important services. So I'll start out where does our revenue come from? Our budget for 2021 is $2.1 billion, and that's just the general fund budget. That does not include the sewer districts, special revenue districts, refuse, sewer, and water. The largest share of our revenue is sales tax. That's probably going to come in somewhere around just under $800 million this year in terms of our forecast, which is we're doing well with our sales tax collections, revenue collections. Real property being the second largest at 28%. Then federal and state aid. A lot of our programs are funded partially or wholly by federal and state aid, especially many of the social service programs and public assistance programs. And then the smaller categories are user fees, which would include, bus fares, parks fees, et cetera. And then other is any other revenues. So that totals 2.1, and our job in budget is to make sure that the expenditures equal the revenues. That's one of our roles, is to make sure that we have the resources to pay for all the expenditures, and that we can sustain that in the long term, which, over the last, in the past, that hasn't necessarily been the case. We've been spending more than what we were taking in, and we had to draw down fund balance, but we've reversed that trend under the current administration to the point where now, we had our negative outlook removed by Fitch, which was important. So we've demonstrated that we have brought our fiscal house in order, and at the same time still being able to address issues arising out of COVID and hurricane or not superstorm, sorry, that was Sandy, but anyways, Ida. And so, and those are the times when it really becomes evident to most of the citizens here in Westchester how important the county is and what the role we play. So on the expenditure side, the largest category at 29%, thank you, is home and community. That includes all the social service programs. We have that's the single largest. And then miscellaneous and fixed, 30% is a large number, but that's all of our anything in the miscellaneous budget, like our fringe benefits for employees, debt service, that supports all of our capital spending because to maintain our infrastructure in the county, transportation and parks, criminal justice, also the larger categories. So these are projected numbers. So as you can see, our projected revenue exceeds our projected expenditures, which means that we're going to add to our reserves. So we're bringing our reserves back up to a level, we're projecting it to be around 12%, or it ended the year 2020 at 12%, which is getting to the territory where, we're now able to weather a situation where, like in the Great Recession, our revenues dropped off a cliff. We did have revenues drop off in April, May of 2020, right after the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic. But then we did recover from that because people essentially were here in Westchester, spending money in Westchester. And so our sales tax benefited from that. So on the next slide, budget process. So the budget process really is a year-round process, but it really kicks off though. So in the beginning of June, I send out a letter which gives general directions to the departments as far as parameters for the budget. And so that's, general guidance. So that kind of kicks off the process. Then through the period of June and August, the departments will go through their developing their budgets. We have a fairly good, system in Westchester as far as, gathering the information, all of the payroll information automatically feeds in, et cetera. So then on September 1st, they'll submit the budget to the Department of Budget. It's under the charter. It's technically due September 10th. We move that date up just to allow a little leeway there. So at this point, what we do is we go through reviewing all the department requests, and we go through, making any changes, any corrections, and then it'll be reviewed by the county executive. We'll discuss whatever policy issues need to be decided on. I mean, budget essentially provides information to, help make educated policy decisions, but we ultimately aren't making those decisions. It's the elected officials, but we help facilitate that process. And then the budget under the charter is required to be submitted to the Board of Legislators on November 10th. So that, and then the legislature now goes through their process in terms of the budget. They have committee hearings, which I believe this year will be virtual. They go through their deliberations internally. And then the budget under the charter has to be adopted by the end of December. It typically is before the holidays, generally speaking. We have, as long as I've been here, and historically, I don't think we've ever had a late budget that I'm aware of. So that kind of goes through the process as outlined in the charter. Then there's other things that we do. We do quarterly forecasts, which is now required in the charter also, to make sure that we can make adjustments to keep spending in line with revenues, depending on what is happening in the county. And then, so that really, in a nutshell, is the process. And, I think that, that you really want to hear about the American Rescue Plan in terms of how we plan on spending. I know there have been a lot of questions on that. And so I don't want to disappoint you, but we're not going to have a lot of specifics at this point in time. We're going through that process. We had conducted the 2 public hearings, which, were required under ARPA, but also we wanted to do that. It's important to get the input from all of you, and we listened. And as we're going through that process, we are certainly going to take under consideration. I mean, there are certainly competing priorities, and it's a limited pot of money, and we need to balance those priorities. And that's part of what the budget process is balancing all of the various priorities that exist in the county. And I think we have a keen appreciation, though, for what the not-for-profits provide to the county. It's very important. Whether it's homelessness, whether it's domestic violence issues, whether it's food insecurity, childcare. I mean, just to name a few of the things that all of you help the county address. And that's important because, if you don't fund those things, it not only are the outcomes worse, but I think that it costs you more in the long run if you're looking at the dollars and cents. It's better outcome to have someone stay in their home and not become homeless. And it actually costs us more if that's not the case. So I think we understand what all of you do and the importance of that. So I'll get right into the American Rescue Plan. We were allocated $188 million. And I think one of the things that's important to point out is under the CARES Act, we received $168 million back in April of last year. April of last year seems like a decade ago at this point, with so many things having transpired since then. But when we first received that in April, we were told the rules were we had to spend it by December 31st. And the rules were very restrictive in terms of what we could use that for. So things did evolve over time when I think the federal government realized that it was going to be difficult for a lot of the municipalities that received that money. And not everyone received that money, by the way. It was anyone over 500,000 in population got that money. So so there were only a handful of counties in New York State that actually got this money directly, and we were lucky to be one of them. So that's a little bit different. Under the American Rescue Plan, we have until the end of 2026 to actually get the money out the door. And we want to make sure that we're strategic about how we spend this money and that what we spend this money on is sustainable in the long run. We don't want to fund, sort of things that we don't have the ability to continue to fund in the future. And I think that's important. And I think one of the things perhaps, and we're focused on, I'll go through some of the main areas, that we can use this money for. Public health response, that's an obvious one. Anything to deal with the response to COVID, whether it's, vaccinations, education, and so forth. Address, and it actually can be more than that. It can be addressing health disparities that exist in the, poor communities. And that's important. And that's one of the focuses of the American Rescue Plan is they really encourage us to use this money in census tract areas where it's needed. And there's a general assumption in the guidance that those areas have been impacted disproportionately, which I think is true. It's to address negative economic impacts. So businesses that had to shut down or, so we are looking at programs. And I will say under the CARES Act, we provided a lot of funding for, we did funding for food insecurity. We provided funding for remote learning for first responders and healthcare workers, et cetera. We provided funding for personal protective equipment. So there was a lot of uses of that fund that and all of that money was spent in 2020. Another thing is to replace government revenue losses. That's one area that was not allowed under the CARES Act. Essential worker premium pay, and then sewer, water, broadband infrastructure. That's important because we have been running deficits in our sewer districts. That's one area where we still need to focus on improving the financial picture. But again, it's a balancing act, and it's a balancing the various priorities with this funding. We held 2 public hearings, one on August 24th in New Rochelle and one on September 13th in Mount Kisco to hear from all of you. And you came out in force, and we listened. And as we're going through this process, some of the themes that we are going to be focusing on, affordable housing came out as one of the, from just about many of the speakers. Healthcare access equity is another area. Economic assistance, and we did provide economic assistance during the CARES Act for not-for-profits, and we're looking at continuing that. Workforce development, affordable childcare, and as I just said, not-for-profit grants. So those are the major themes that we're looking at, and clearly was communicated to us during the public hearings where there's needs in the county. We issued a preliminary plan on 8/31 as far required by the federal regulation. Again, that's at a high level, but it does outline the major categories that we're focusing on. And so again, these mirror basically what I just said here: affordable housing, public health, mental health, small business, not-for-profit grants, tourism and hospitality. We had one speaker, I think at one of the hearings, that mentioned how many hotel rooms capacity that we've lost in the county, with 3 hotels being closed down. And there's a lack of convention space here now, or meeting space, I should say. And so that's an issue. That we need to look at. Sewer infrastructure is important. And that's an area where we'll be looking at to focus on, because we can use the funds to invest in sewer, water infrastructure. However, I think that the needs there are extensive, but we may be focusing on communities where the infrastructure costs are disproportionate to the tax base, which could cause, sewer taxes to increase significantly. And then stronger community grants to support equitable outcomes would be funding programs that address a lot of these needs that you all here have brought to our attention. So that's really, very high level on the American Rescue Plan Act funds, but we'll be going through that as we go through. We'll be developing our plan as we go through the budget process. And again, important to mention that money can be spent over, a long period of time, so it doesn't all have to be spent, within the first year. So, I'll open it up to.
Yeah. Yes. So we are, again, very thankful for the 2 forums that the county conducted. Many of our agencies certainly came out and submitted questions and comments and recommendations for the American Rescue Plan Act funding and investment. So thank you to those who did that. We are going to open this up for questions. I do have some here that were given to me by the virtual audience, but I'm going to call up Allison Lake, the Executive Director of the Westchester Children's Association and an NPW board member, to ask the first question. And if there are any other people in this audience who want to ask a question, I just ask you to go stand over there and you can come up to the podium. Oh, over there, sorry. Okay. Wherever you want.
I'm on camera, right? This is the better mic?
Yes.
All right, great. So thank you and good morning to everyone. As Jan said, my name is Allison Lake. I'm the Executive Director of Westchester Children's Association. We are a multi-issue children's advocacy organization. We work on policy, budget, legislation that impacts children, youth, and young adults in our county from 0 to 25 years of age. So appreciate your time this morning. I was at the Mount Kisco event and spoke about the need to expand home visiting, which is a program that brings supports into the homes of families with young children. And we'll be following up as an agency with some details on that. But I was happy to hear you speak about understanding the need of upfront sort of preventative funding, right? That saves all of us money in the long term.
Right.
And home visiting is an evidence-based model that has proven to have that success for children and families. So we'll follow up on that. But this morning, I want to sort of get a feeling from you and your department more about the budget and how we can, as nonprofits, as advocates, get a better understanding of the budget. I belong to a national group called Partnerships for America's Children of other advocate organizations. And one of my colleagues out in Colorado, they've done what's called a children's budget, where they're pulling out of the state those lines that actually impact children, 0 to 25. And that's been a wish for us at Westchester Children's Association to work with you, the budget department, and obviously the other county departments to see if we could do a children's budget here in Westchester, to understand how we are spending on our next generation. Everyone talks and says that they support children and want children to have what they need. But as you said, a budget shows our priorities. And so we are hoping to approach you where we're trying to find some funding to support this work for ourselves, but wanted to hear from you what you think that process may be. Is it too difficult? Am I not understanding? Or do you think that there is something that we could create from the different departments? Obviously, Department of Social Service, as you said, is the largest. And they have a lot of programs that impact children, but really just wanted to sort of throw that out to you and your department to see if it's something you've heard of or experienced or how you think we could go about that.
Well, yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that I will admit that if you look at our budget, it's not going to be obvious.
Exactly.
And I think one thing we can do, is we could certainly put together a list of all of the various programs, because we have children with special needs within the health department. That's all dealing with children, and a lot of that cost is transportation, obviously. And then we have, if in DSS, you have foster care programs, you have all of the preventative type
Right.
programs. We can certainly pull out all that information because we have that data and show you exactly how much we spend on children in Westchester. That's actually not that difficult for us to do.
Okay.
And so that's something, Gideon was nodding his head so he agrees with me, which is a good thing, because he's the one that's going to do that probably.
I get this car. That's the car that I need, right? Yeah.
So yeah, we could certainly provide that to you, but I know the number is significant,
Mhm.
though, but it is.
Hundreds of them.
Yes.
Yeah, and from the different departments, as you said, we've worked closely with Department of Probation on the criminal justice,
Exactly.
their programs that
That-
impact. And so I think it just helps, all of us as citizens to understand, as you said, where the county dollars are going. Most citizens don't really understand county
Well-
budget too much. And so we're hoping as part of our advocacy that we could better understand trends, gaps, and, advocate accordingly. So that
Okay.
would be great.
Yeah, and it may also be in places you might not even be aware. It could be
Sure.
DA's, diversion programs and
Right.
things like that. I mean, that's a focus. So there's a lot of different areas where we
Okay.
spend money. But yes,
I
that's
will
something we
follow
can
up. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, she will.
do.
Is there anyone from the in-person audience who has a question at this point, which is okay? So I do have a number of questions from the virtual audience that were sent in. So I will start with that. So Larry, as you mentioned, racial equity and equity in general is a big focus of the ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act funding. We have seen during COVID, made loudly and clearly by the fact that people of color, specifically Black people, died at twice the rate of white people of COVID. And so we as an organization and as a country, and I think as a county, are concerned about that. And certainly we know our officials in the county have expressed concern about to address that. We have a question from Maria Imperial, CEO of the YWCA of White Plains and Central Westchester. As we know, they launched the first Center for Racial Equity in the county with the support of the county as well. And her question is, has the county considered doing a race equity audit of the budget or consider doing a secret type analysis before programs are funded? So I think this relates to the budget in general and to the ARPA funding as a way to measure how grants are dispersed.
So I can't say that we've done an outright audit, but I think that certainly is a priority of the current administration. And I think that there will be a focus on that as we are formulating our plan for how we use the ARPA funds and in terms of the programs that we provide. I mean, I would say that we do have a number of existing programs that do help to address the issue. And, we also went through a police reform process to come up with a plan that will, address it in the criminal justice arena. And we'll likely have some things to be funded in the budget to address that. So there certainly is a focus and a priority on that area, but I can't, outright say that we've done an audit, but that is an interesting idea for sure.
And this is an issue that Nonprofit Westchester has been working with Nonprofit New York in the philanthropic sector. What are the standards and the criteria by which organizations are funded, and how has that historically really underfunded organizations run by and serving people of color, specifically organizations run by people of color being underfunded due to systemic and historical issues. So this type of audit would be very interesting and certainly could reveal biases that we all have in the work we do. So thank you for that.
Sure.
I'm going to go to the next question, which is from Rachel Halbrin, CEO of Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. Does the county plan on presenting its plan for how it's going to spend the ARPA funds? And if so, will there be an additional period for public comment?
I think that's, goes to a policy question, but we do plan on this being a public process and, clearly demonstrated by the public hearings that we had. And at some point in time, and it's certainly during the budget process, it will become public what we intend to spend the funds on. So I do believe at some point in time, I can't give you the exact timing on that, but certainly what we put in the 2022 budget that we're funding with ARPA funds will be public. And so I think we're still kind of going through that process right now, but absolutely it will be made public. And it is required to be made public by the Treasury Department in terms of our reporting on it as well.
Excellent, thank you. So this may be a more policy-driven question, but any comments on the issues of flooding, Hurricane Ida and flood mitigation, particularly efforts to work with the federal government on what we know has been a decades-long process of getting the Army Corps of Engineers into Mamaroneck to actually implement the flood mitigation process that we know will save lives, will save businesses, and will really mitigate or avoid the really disastrous outcomes of Hurricane Ida. And anything else that you want to say? I know seeing Emily here and certainly knowing how hard the county worked to support the community, to work with FEMA, to work with the state to address what's going on there, but specifically the mitigation plan and anything else you'd like for us to know about what has been done and what will be done in the future.
So specifically on the Army Corps project in Mamaroneck, we are partnering with the state. We're providing half of the funding to update that study. And we intend to move forward. I think it did get stalled at the federal level in terms of the funding. Although the Army Corps has approved the project, they haven't been appropriated any federal money. They're putting up a significant amount of the close to $90 million for that specific project. And so we are moving forward with the state in terms of funding that project and moving it forward. One of the other things we've done from a symptomatic standpoint is we've helped make sure that those individuals displaced from their homes in Mamaroneck have housing. We sort of took over from the Red Cross. The Red Cross initially was the entity handling that, and we've been working very closely with them to transition that. And we're providing funding, not only for hotel rooms, and we don't know exactly how long that will be for, but the need, but we'll continue to fund it, and food, et cetera. And, the other issue would be transportation for school age children. So we, that's shows how important it is for, what a role the county plays. As far as, we're working with FEMA, we're now assessing the extent of the damage, at least the county portion of it. And, they will pay for mitigation measures, so that is something that the FEMA does fund. Certainly if there are other needs out there. I mean, I think the flooding issue is a much bigger issue than just the project in Mamaroneck. That's not gonna, that'll deal with it in that specific isolated area, maybe. But it's a much bigger issue going forward with climate change and how we address that. And when we're doing any construction or capital projects, we need to be cognizant of the frequency and the extent of these storms that we're experiencing now. And so I think that's important. I think that, that's not something I think we can fund on our own at the local level. And perhaps if this infrastructure bill at the federal level ever, ends up happening, maybe there'll be some funding there to address it. But this is really, beyond our capabilities, but I think we have to start somewhere and initiate the process. And so I think that's important, but we are doing what we can at this point.
And for those who don't know this project, the reason we bring up Mamaroneck in particular is because, as I said, there is a decades-long federal project that has been stalled for various reasons. And this particular project, it is believed, will seriously mitigate the flooding, and really provide some sense of relief to the community. And so NPW is, we have a sign-on letter that went out yesterday. It will be on our website. We encourage nonprofit organizations and businesses to please sign on. This will support the efforts of our federal legislators who are working to make this happen. Yesterday, we spoke with Senator Schumer's office, with Senator Gillibrand's office, with Congressman Bowman's office. They are working really hard to push this project forward that will save lives, will save businesses, to the extent that we can show our elected officials and other government, federal government departments, that the community, regardless of whether you operate a business of any type in Mamaroneck, cares about this issue as Westchester residents, New York residents. It will be very helpful. We do have the support of Nonprofit New York and the New York Council of Nonprofits, which is a statewide organization. So the more support we get, the better to help move this project forward. So now I'm going to go to my phone for a minute and get the questions, but I know Kathy Hallis asked a question first. Larry, she wants to know if you are rooting for Tom Brady, the Patriots, when they play each other this weekend.
Oh, gosh.
Kidding, but Larry has been a Pats fan for years. So now we have a little
Sorry about that.
personal information about you. So do you have an answer or you want to pass?
Well, no, it's kind of hard not to root for Tom Brady after having rooted for him as the quarterback of the Pats for so long. So, and I'm not sure I might have better luck rooting for him than the Pats right now. But at any rate, yeah, no, I still follow.
Okay, and now she has another question.
Yeah, a real question. Okay.
And this may be another policy question, but we'll ask it. First of all, she says, thank you and to the county for picking up families whose childcare scholarships from the state ended earlier. There are tens of thousands of families who are over income for childcare financial assistance, given the state's existing cap of 200% of the federal poverty level. The cap doesn't make sense in higher cost of living communities like Westchester. Would you support raising the cap to 85% of state median income so that our county can serve more deserving families and be able to use all of its state's childcare allocation? Again, don't know if this is a question for you or, in the future, the BOL or the CE.
Well, I think certainly it's a policy question, but I can probably go out on a limb and say that we would support that. I think we saw during COVID when they waived the income limitation requirement, and it was at 85% of median area income, how many people actually needed that service, funding. And so we continued to fund those individuals' daycare even after that waiver was removed. So I think that is certainly something that we would support and make sense given the high cost of living that exists, especially in Westchester County.
Okay. Onward, we have a question from Deborah Brown of Spark, which is a disability serving organization. People with disabilities are also often left out of planning. This is according to Deborah. How can we find out what funds are available for programs for people with developmental disabilities, especially workforce development and therapeutic recreational programs? I do know that workforce development is and workforce accessibility is an issue. We have a disabilities roundtable now at Nonprofit Westchester that was formed in direct response to our organizations asking for this during COVID, feeling that people with disabilities are the last to be hired and the first to be fired, and that there's not a general understanding of the value that they bring to the workforce. I do believe also, Larry, that there is some clarity needed in terms of what the state funds for disability services and what the county funds, and the relationship between the state and the county in funding things like recreational services, waiver services, discretionary budgets that people with disabilities get to spend and for themselves. So I think that's an important item in general that people don't always understand. I certainly didn't a number of years ago, what the state funds, what the county funds. Certainly you can't do that now, but it might be a good time to just touch on that as
right.
well.
That's what I was going to say. I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, but I do know that we fund programs, and I can certainly as similar to my answer on that I provided earlier on services for children, we can glean that out of the budget for you and put that information together to show you, what the services are, how much is funded by state, how much is potentially federal, and how much is county. But
Okay.
we're making a note to do that.
Okay. So I have one more question that was sent to me. I do encourage our virtual audience, if they want to ask any questions, to please do so. And if there are any other people here in the in-person audience, raise your hand and you can come up and ask a question. Okay. If not, I'm going to go Virginia Folkrod from Hudson Valley Justice Center. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. We all know a lot of people fell behind in rent during the pandemic. ERAP alone will not stop all evictions. The legislature passed new laws that could prevent evictions, but they are complicated, and without attorneys, many tenants will not be able to enforce them. We understood the county executive will introduce a county right to counsel bill in the coming months. What are the budget implications of implementing this vital program? And so for those of us in the audience who don't know, right to counsel basically ensures the right to counsel for people going into court in eviction proceedings so that they have representation before the judge, like many or most of the landlords do.
So, I mean, that one I'll have to say is a policy decision clearly that I can't really speak to at this point in time. We understand the need, though, however, for individuals facing eviction to have some ability, and some of them may not, some individuals may not have the wherewithal to navigate the different services that could be available to them to help prevent them from being evicted. And I think that's something that we're looking at addressing, whether it's through, right of counsel or some other means. There's no question that there's a need out there for that. And so I think that's something that will be on the top of the list to be discussed during the budget process.
Why don't you come up? So this is Emily Saltzman, who's the Deputy Director of Operations for the county.
I just want to add, as the caller knows, the questioner, we have worked closely with Legal Services of the Hudson Valley and Hudson Valley Justice Center throughout the pandemic, providing grants to assist people before the ERAP program. We also understand that New York State, OTDA, will be providing funding, separate funding for eviction prevention services above and beyond ERAP. And the ERAP funding does go a long way. So we're trying to look at this evolving situation. We knew that there was definitely a large number of evictions before the pandemic. And we're trying to evaluate what the system is now with these pots of funding, and then into the future when the moratorium changes, when the court system can be expected to deal with the large backlog of cases. But we have been supportive of many of the groups. They're working with us as partners in ERAP and beyond. And we're also trying to do everything that we can on the affordable housing front. So thank you for raising the issue.
Right. And it will undoubtedly come up again, I'm sure, in our future forums, budget forums with the BOL on the 7th and the county executive on the 21st. I'm looking, Allison, come up again. Okay.
Thanks. This is just a follow-up to the question about the ARP funding, which you said, does have to be reported out. But I'm just wondering how for this budget, is it going to be obvious sort of what's supported by county revenue versus ARP, or is it going to be sort of a melded budget? Like how would we be able to sort of see what's funded, as you said, by this very limited pot of money versus our ongoing county revenues?
Well, so I think I would say that how we present it in the budget document itself, it may not be obvious, but I think we would probably, we will likely put together a separate document that would outline specifically the ARPA money that's in the budget, but just based on the format of how our budget is put together, which I would be the first one to admit is not the most user friendly. And we are working on that in terms of putting a summary together that is going to be more of a web-based interactive type of a document, but that isn't going to be ready for prime time probably for this budget. But yes, we would provide that information separately because I think that's very important. Yes.
Okay, I do not see any more questions. I think this was really informative. Larry, I want to give you the opportunity if there's anything else, or Emily, if you want to come back up,
No.
either one of you. No. We have a strong partnership with the county, and we are very happy to be moving things forward in partnership. We know there's a long way to go. There's been a lot of damage done between the pandemic and now the hurricane. And as we say, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And we do recognize the significance of our organizations in really, helping those who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and by Ida. So we please welcome any thoughts that you may have. We encourage all organizations and businesses to sign on to that letter. It is not a criticism of our elected officials at the federal level. It is intended as support to help them move their agenda forward in supporting the mitigation project. But Larry, I did say you would have the last word.
Oh,
so if
okay.
you want, and I keep talking, so it's yours now.
So I think, you mentioned I've been here at the county 10 years, and this is the first time we've had the opportunity where we have this funding where we can actually look at it and be strategic and methodical about how we spend it. And we want to do things that will be transformative, I think, for the county and sustainable in the long run. And so, I think we want to be very thoughtful and about how we use this money so it helps the county in the long run going forward. So I'm very lucky to have this position. I get to work with a lot of very talented people in the county. We have and people that really care and are passionate about what they do. So I'm not just saying that, I mean that. So and so that's important to mention. Of all the resources we have, including the not-for-profits that we work very closely with. So.
Well, we're ending early, which is great. And if you have any further questions, email them to me. And we have, ongoing conversations with our partners. So thank you. And thank you all. And thank you, Strategic Services and Arnie Linhart, for supporting our government relations series. That's it.